The first page we see here is what everybody else has had. You know, the presentation here is sponsored by the Mendocino Auxiliary Communications Service, MAX, Mendocino County Amateur Radio Communications Service, McCarks, and the Willits Amateur Radio Society, WARS. This is supplement G1, Commission Rules, and this is the introduction. My name is Barbara Ann Scora. You can call me Barbara. You can call me km6zrv@gmail.com. What are the commission rules? The commission rules are the FCC Title 47, CFR Part 97. And what does that all mean? It's alphabet soup, right? Federal Communications Commission, Title 47 Code of Federal Regulations, the CFR, Part 97 Rules of the Amateur Radio Service. These are rules that need to be followed as far as privileges and restrictions, or you could be fined and detained by the federal government. Why? A little history. Yes, scientists and hams did invent radio communications in 1901. At the turn of the century, everyone was free to ride the airwaves until discrimination and wartime came, when rogue operators started messing maliciously with military communications and sabotaging operations. The party was over in 1927 when the Federal Radio Commission stepped in and the FCC took over in 1934. This is why you need to have a license. This is why you need to pass testing to get a license, and a license with a higher power. This is why you need to let the FCC know who you are and what your skill level is. The exam. There are 5 exam questions picked from these rules out of 57 questions in the pool. The 5 possible questions that could end up on your test involving roughly 24 FCC rules. There are 63 Part 97 rules and 2 appendices. The presentation here is going to be organized by rule. We'll visit the questions and answers within each rule. This is Chapter 3, Rules and Regulations in the ARRL General Class Study Guide. You can get your question pool page 10.3 through 10.12 ready if you have it. And the lecture is going to take roughly 30 minutes. There's a few discrepancies between the resources that we're working on resolving. So hopefully we'll get some things resolved. Maybe we'll get some things explained a little bit better for the next time through. We can update this presentation. I find myself, I keep wanting to say break because I did this lecture on the radio a few months ago. And every time I had to stop talking, I said break before I had to do that. Okay, subsection 97-101, general standards. I'm not going to read all of these, but for an example, I will read this first one. For general standards, there is 97-101, and I call this subsection A or subparagraph A. In all respects, not specifically covered by the FCC rules, each amateur station must be operated in accordance with good engineering and good amateur practice. Okay, so that's a rule, and I'm going to give you a resource to find these rules at the end of this presentation. I'm not going to read every rule as we go through this. Again, I'm going to read the questions. So the question that could possibly pop up on your test that pertains to this rule is G1B11, and it is who or what determines good engineering and good amateur practice as applied to the operation of an amateur station in all respects not covered by the Part 97 rules? The answer to that is the FCC. So that's basically how this whole presentation is set up. It's very much a flashcard experience. So the next rule that is addressed is 97-111, authorized transmissions. And the question that pertains to this is, which of the following one-way transmissions are permitted? And the answer is, I'm not going to focus on the letter because from what I understand from other presenters on the test, these letters can change. The answer is transmissions to assist with learning the International Morse code. So if you go back and you look up and you read the rule that I picked out for this question, you'll see that it says transmissions to assist learning the International Morse code. And I would like to, kind of persuade you to take this PowerPoint presentation and run it a few times and spend a little time with it and see if it helps out. We're still in authorized transmissions. 97-111 is question G1B08. When is it permissible to communicate with amateur stations in countries outside the areas administered by the Federal Communications Commission? When the contact is with amateurs in any country except those whose administrations have notified the ITU that they object to such communications. And that is the International Telecommunications Union. Okay, 97-111. No rule was found at all using the term Wi-Fi. So I found this to be a little bit weird. However, G1E07. In what part of the 2.4 gigahertz band may an amateur station communicate with non-licensed Wi-Fi stations? The answer would be no part. 97-113, prohibited transmissions. Which of the following transmissions is permitted for all amateur stations? Occasional retransmission of weather and propagation forecast information from the US government stations. We're still in prohibited transmissions. What are the restrictions on the use of abbreviations or procedural signals in the amateur service? They may be used if they do not obscure the meaning of a message. Third-party communications. Which of the following would disqualify a third party from participating in sending a message via an amateur station? The third party's amateur license has been revoked and not reinstated. So that would be a disqualifying scenario. Still in third-party communications. What are the restrictions on messages sent to a third party in a country with which there is a third-party agreement? They must relate to amateur radio or remarks of a personal character or messages relating to emergencies or disaster relief. So we're still in third-party communications. There's another question. Under what circumstances are messages that are sent via digital modes exempt from Part 97 third-party rules that apply to other modes of communication? Under no circumstances. When may third-party messages be transmitted via remote control? Under any circumstances in which third-party messages are permitted by FCC rules. You know, some of these answers are they're kind of twisted. The wording is very twisted. So, I mean, that's kind of a strange answer, but it is. We're just saying under any circumstances in which, well, the government is basically saying under any circumstances in which third-party messages are permitted by FCC rules. And the question is, when may third-party messages be transmitted via remote control? And it's anytime the FCC says so. International communications. What are the restrictions on messages sent to a third party in a country with which there is a third party agreement? They must relate to amateur radio or remarks of personal character or messages relating to emergencies or disaster relief. And we just heard that answer 2 slides back. Same question, same answer, different rule. Station identification. This is subsection 97.119. What did I put that note in there for? Operator license grant. We'll find out. Until an upgrade to general class is shown in the FCC database, when must a technician license identify with AG after their call sign? Whenever they operate using general class frequency privileges. And I'm not sure if anybody has become aware of this, but when you do get a higher license, and until you are actually upgraded to that license, you can use your own call sign with the new license abbreviation at the end of it. So if I was waiting for my general class privileges, I could say I am KM6ZRV AG. Restrictions on station location, subsection 97.13. Which of the following conditions require a licensed amateur radio operator to take specific steps to avoid harmful interference to other users or facilities? Now you'll notice this, oops, what did I do? Did I go back too far? No, I went too, all right, hold on. There we go. You'll notice there is this question, the GE 104, the GE 04, and we, this question applies to 3 different rules. So this, this question could come up at any time, cross-referencing 3 different of the FCC rules. Not to confuse the matter at all. Let's see. Which of the following conditions require a licensed amateur radio operator to take specific steps to avoid harmful interference to other users or facilities? All of the choices here are correct. When operating within 1 mile of an FCC monitoring station, when using a band where the amateur service is secondary, when a station is transmitting spread spectrum emissions. So all of these choices are correct for this question. Station antenna structures. What is the maximum height above ground for an antenna structure not near a public use airport without requiring notification to the FAA and registration with the FCC? 200 feet. Station antenna structures continued. Under what conditions are state and local governments permitted to regulate amateur radio antenna structures? Amateur service communications must be reasonably accommodated, and regulations must constitute the minimum practical to accommodate a legitimate purpose of the state or local entity. So there's no straight answer. It's just, hey, we got to accommodate each other. Beacon station. This was one of the areas that's broken in the book. And that's the fix. The rule that applies is not 97.101, it's 97.203. There was no specific sub-rule applied to this question. The question says, why should an amateur operator normally avoid transmitting on the 14.100, 18.110, 21.150, 24.930, and 28.200 megahertz? A system of propagation beacon stations operates on those frequencies. So you should avoid transmitting on those frequencies because they support a beacon station. And a beacon station is a station that I'm sure you know what this is. It sends out information to let other receivers know that it's active. Is that a good explanation? Does anybody else have a better explanation? Okay, we're still under beacon stations. With which of the following conditions must beacon stations comply? No more than one beacon station may transmit in the same band from the same station location. And that makes sense. You wouldn't want receivers out there catching, multiple transmissions from one station that says, here's my frequency and I'm this station. And if somebody else sent a beacon transmission out that said something different, then that would be quite confusing. We're still under beacon stations. On what HF frequencies are automatically controlled beacons permitted? 28.20 megahertz to 28.30 megahertz. And that is one of the answers. And I don't know why they did this way, because if you read the rule, there's a whole lot of frequencies involved. But all they're looking for is that answer of 28.20 megahertz to 28.30 megahertz. So I find that very confusing. Still under beacon stations. What is the power limit for beacon stations? It's telling you right up there, subrule C, 100 watts PEP, peak envelope power output. Now we're into repeater stations. What portion of the 10-meter band is available for repeater use? A portion above 29.5 megahertz. When may a 10-meter repeater retransmit the 2-meter signal from a station that has a technician class control operator? Only if the 10-meter repeater control operator holds at least a general class license. So that's a kind of twisted question too. Automatically controlled digital stations, 97.221. I found no specific subrule applied to the questions, but the first question we have is, what is required to conduct communications with a digital station operating under automatic control outside the automatic control band segments? The station initiating the contact must be under local or remote control. On what bands may automatically control stations transmitting RTTY, radio teletype, or data emissions communicate with other automatically controlled digital stations? Anywhere in the 6-meter or shorter wavelength bands and in limited segments of some of the HF bands. So we have a section in the rules called definitions. It's a subsection 97.3. So we're going to be covering some definitions here. Which of the following is a purpose of a beacon station as identified in the FCC rules? And you'll see in the definitions under subsection A, item 9, beacon is an amateur station transmitting communications for the purposes of observation of propagation and reception of other related experimental activities. So there is my description of what a beacon station is. And the answer they're looking for is observation of propagation and reception. Okay, authorized frequency bands. Throughout the FCC rules, there are these tables, and they are quite handy and informative and kind of mind-boggling. I only took this page right here to give you an example of these tables of frequencies that you can find in the rules under authorized frequencies. Some of these questions refer to this table. You may want to go to the FCC rules and just print out the tables. There's another section of the authorized frequency bands. I don't know what all of this information means. On which HF and or MF amateur bands are there portions where general class licensees cannot transmit? And this would be an important question to know if you're going for your general class license. 80 meters, 40 meters, 20 meters, and 15 meters. There are all portions where the general class licensees cannot transmit. Now, if we go back up and look at the tables, it says for a station having a control operator who has been granted an operator license of general class, you would be able to figure out from this table, you know, what answer they're looking for, but you have to go and read in between the frequencies. And then the next question is, on which of the following frequencies are general class licensees prohibited from operating as control operator? 7.125 megahertz to 7.175 megahertz. So on these questions, I would recommend you just memorize them. You know, memorize the answers, focus on the answers. Which of the following frequencies is within the general class portion of the 15-meter band? 21,300 kilohertz, 21,300 kilohertz. Authorized frequency bands. This is for stations having control operator who's been granted the amateur extra class license and who holds a SEPT radio amateur license. SEPT is the European Conference of Postal and Telecommunications Administration. The IARP is the International Amateur Radio Permit. Which HF bands have segments exclusively allocated to amateur extra licensees? 80 meters, 40 meters, 20 meters, and 15 meters. Again, we had that question a couple of slides back. The answer was the same, 80, 40, 20, and 15 meters. I had no specific subrule applied to this question. When general class licensees are not permitted to use the entire voice portion of a band, which portion of the voice segment is available to them? The upper frequency portion. And don't ask me any questions about this because I don't know, and I don't even know what it is. The frequency allocations of which ITU region apply to radio amateurs operating in North and South America? Region 2. Frequency sharing requirements. Which of the following applies when the FCC rules designate the amateur service as a secondary user on a band? Amateur stations must not cause harmful interference to primary users and must accept interference from primary users. Which of the following conditions require a licensed amateur radio operator to take specific steps to avoid harmful interference to other users or facilities? All of the choices are correct here. When operating within 1 mile of an FCC monitoring station, when using a band where the amateur service is secondary, and when a station is transmitting spread spectrum emissions. Frequency and sharing requirements continued. There was another question that had the wrong rule reference. When operating a station in South America by remote control over the internet from the US, what regulations apply? Only those of the remote station's country. And that's kind of an easy answer. Frequency sharing requirements, 60-meter band. Which of the following amateur bands is restricted to communication only on specific channels rather than frequency ranges? 60 meters. Okay, here we got a particular sub-rule that's going to be applied to the next question. What is the maximum bandwidth permitted by FCC rules for amateur radio stations transmitting on USB upper sideband frequencies in the 60-meter band? 2.8 kilohertz. I don't know if I can make that. I don't know if we can, I just can't even make that connection here in this text. Yeah, 2.8 kilohertz. What it says right here, the amateur operators shall ensure that their emissions do not occupy more than 2.8 kilohertz centered on each of these center frequencies. Authorized emission types. On which of the following bands is phone operation prohibited? 30 meters. On which of the following bands is image transmission prohibited? 30 meters. On what bands may automatically controlled stations transmitting radio teletype or data emissions communicate with other automatically controlled digital stations? Guess what the answer is? Anywhere in the 6-meter or shorter wavelength bands and in limited segments of some of the HF bands. So that one's not as simple as the other two. Authorized emission types. And CW here, I believe, CW refers to Morse code, but I think what they are referring to in this rule is continuous wave. And I don't know if there's a difference or if I've got this wrong or what. On which amateur frequencies in the 10-meter band may stations with a general class control operator transmit CW emissions? The entire band. Authorized emission types. Oh, I see. Yeah, there's another section of there called emission standards, and that's what 97307F rule is called, emission standards. What is the maximum symbol rate permitted for radio teletype, RTTY, or data emissions transmissions on the 10-meter band? 1200 baud. You'll notice that FCC rules, they say bauds, B-A-U-D-S, anytime they refer to the word baud. We will see 97307F4 next. What is the maximum symbol rate permitted for RTTY or data emissions transmitted at frequencies below 28 megahertz? 300 baud. What is the maximum symbol rate permitted for RTTY or data emission transmissions on the 10-meter band? 1200 baud. When operating a station in South America by remote control over the internet from the US, what regulations apply? Only those of the remote station's country. Remember, I brought our attention to this question, that there were 3 rules that applied to this question. So this question could, pop up. It's only going to pop up once, but it could pop up in a few different wordings. And the answer is only those of the remote station's country. RTTY and data emission codes. What must be done before using a new digital protocol on the air? Publicly document the technical characteristics of the protocol. I have no idea what else, how to do that. Okay, now we're into spread spectrum emission types, subsection 97.311. Which of the following conditions require a licensed amateur radio operator to take specific steps to avoid harmful interference to other users or facilities? All of the choices are correct. When operating within 1 mile of an FCC monitoring station, when using a band where the amateur service is secondary, when a station is transmitting spread spectrum emissions. And you will see there are, again, a few FCC rules that apply to this question. Transmitter power standards. What is the maximum transmitter power an amateur station may use on the 12-meter band? 1,500 watts peak envelope power output. What is the limit for transmitter power on the 28 megahertz band for a general class control operator? 1,500 watts PEP output. What is the limit for transmitter power on the 1.8 megahertz band? Does anybody want to guess what that answer is? 1,500 watts PEP. Okay. That's a good number to remember. Transmitter power standards continued. What measurement is specified by FCC rules that regulate maximum power? PEP, the peak envelope power, output from the transmitter. What is the maximum transmitter power an amateur station may use on 10.140 megahertz? 200 watts PEP. We've got a couple of abbreviations here or initializations here. ERP. ERP stands for effective radiated power. And again, PEP is peak envelope power. What is the maximum power limit on the 60-meter band? ERP, effective radiated power of 100 watts PEP with respect to a dipole. Here was a broken reference in the book, in the study guide. Which of the following is required by the FCC rules when operating in the 60-meter band? If you are using an antenna other than a dipole, you must keep a record of the gain of your antenna. What is the maximum PEP output allowed for spread spectrum transmissions? 10 watts. Who may receive partial credit for the elements represented by an expired amateur radio license? We have moved in to the qualifying for an amateur license, an amateur operator license section. Who may receive partial credit for the elements represented by an expired amateur radio license? Any person who can demonstrate that they once held an FCC issued general, advanced, or amateur extra class license that was not revoked by the FCC. So you can receive partial credit for the elements represented by an expired amateur radio license. Element credit. What action is required to obtain a new general license after a previously held license has expired and the 2-year grace period has passed? The answer is the applicant must show proof of the appropriate expired license grant and pass the current Element 2 exam. Who may receive partial credit for the elements represented by an expired amateur radio license? Any person who can demonstrate that they once held an FCC issued general, advanced, or amateur extra license that was not revoked by the FCC. I didn't get that one to fly in correctly. I should make myself a note on that. Hold on one second. That's slide 52. Needs to be fixed. Okay, administering volunteer examiner requirements. So VE is a volunteer examiner. A VCE is a volunteer coordinator examiner. What license examinations may you administer as an accredited volunteer examiner holding a general class operator license? Technician only is the answer. And administering VE requirements continued. This was a broken rule. Who must observe the administration of a technical class license examination? And this is observing the administration of one. At least 3 volunteer examiners of general class or higher. Volunteer examiners are accredited by what organization? A volunteer examiner coordinator. Which of the following criteria must be met for a non-US citizen to be accredited volunteer examiner? To be an accredited volunteer examiner. This is a non-US citizen. The person must hold an FCC granted amateur radio license of general class or above. So again, the question was, which of the following criteria must be met for a non-US citizen to be an accredited volunteer examiner? The person must hold an FCC granted amateur radio license of general class or above. What is the minimum age that one must be qualified, what is the minimum age that one must be to qualify as an accredited volunteer examiner? You must be 18 years or older. We're getting toward the end. We've only got a few more slides left. Okay, control operator required. This is subsection 97.7. When operating a US station by remote control from outside the country, what license is required of the control operator? A US operator primary station license. Do not know what that is? If anyone knows what that is, let us know. Okay, operator license grant. On which of the following band segments may you operate if you are a technician class operator and have an unexpired certificate of successful completion of examination for general class privileges? That's a CSCE. On any general or technician class band segment. How long is a certificate of successful completion of examination valid for exam element credit? 365 days. Okay, we are done. I added some study resources on this page. Earl Pazig, W8BR, has some really good study resources. They are available for nonprofit use. If you use his material, drop him an email and thank him. You can add my call sign to thanking him, because I've been in contact with him, and his general class PowerPoint presentation is very pretty. He posts the questions using that chart that I told you about. You can see up here in this picture. He gave me permission to use his presentation, but it just wasn't tying in the rules for me. And I'm only experienced with the FCC rules. So I wanted to follow a trail on this that would make sense to me. You can go to his website, paazig.net/T. Click on main menu on the right, course presentations, under the 2023 to 2027 column. His presentation is the G1 Commission rules. Wikipedia has been a real valuable resource for me as I was learning these rules, with gaining expertise or knowledge with amateur radio terminology. And, just go to Wikipedia and, search on amateur radio, and, they've got everything you could possibly want to learn there. All you have to do is search for the terms and you'll get an explanation for what they are. And the websites here for Max, McCarks, and Wars, I put down the website addresses, the domain names. And the Wars website is currently down. We are giving it a facelift and a new server, and we should have it up and running within the next couple of weeks. My last page here is, where are the rules? Where can you find these rules? And you can find them on www.ecfr.gov. And it's a real complicated website of FCC rules for all kinds of communications, not just amateur, but you can drill down and find Title 47, Part 97, amateur radio service, and find all of these rules. You can upload a PDF copy and you can search that PDF copy if you should decide to do so. It would hardly help you pass this test. I think the best thing to do to pass this test is to take a look at Earl Pazig's presentation, maybe, and to just use this presentation in a flashcard form. There's a lot more rules than there are questions on the test. So I tried to group them all by rule. Tim Hanna wanted me to make an announcement. He wanted me to make sure that I remind the students that they need to register with Tim if they want to take the test on November 11th in Ukiah. Currently, he has one signed up for tech and one for general. So make sure you contact Tim Hanna. He is, oh boy, what is his email address? Let's see if I can find his email address. I think he's Hanna, HANNA @gmail.com.
That sounds right.
Yeah. And if you don't find him, email me and I will give you the right email. And I'm KX.
Also, Barbara, it's also on the McCark site on the where all the videos are.
Oh, okay. Great.
I think Nick did that. He put all the both the test dates for the November 4th Fort Bragg test and then the November 11th Ukiah test.
Perfect. Thank you.
You bet.
Okay. Well, I'm done. Done and done.
Barb.
Yes.
Tim's address is T.E. Hanna.
T.E. Hanna?
Tango Delta.
Okay. Why don't you repeat that? Because you came out kind of garbled.
Yes. T.D. Hanna. Tango Delta Hotel Alpha November Alpha.
Okay.
At Gmail.